In late fall of 1916, just on the outskirts of a small Wisconsin town, a farmer named Albert Engel created what neighbors thought was the most realistic scarecrow they had ever seen. The figure hung from a tree just at the back of his cornfield, its arms slightly stretched, its head slumped low beneath a wide brim hat, and from a distance, it looked eerily haunting. So lifelike, in fact, that it drew curious locals who came to admire Albert's work. Some even walked up to his door and asked how he made it so convincing. But Albert's family looked puzzled. They said he hadn't been home in days, and they didn't notice the scarecrow had appeared in the tree until now. But by the following morning, word had spread of the mysterious scarecrow, and it began to become a local attraction of sorts. But it was one curious neighbor riding by on horseback who decided to take a closer look. And that's when the illusion was shattered. Hidden beneath the wide-brim hat was not a face of burlap and straw, but the partially decaying one of Albert Engel. The body had been hanging there the whole time, mistaken for one of his own scarecrow creations. His death had been ruled self-inflicted, but what makes this story especially chilling is how dozens of people, including his family, passed by and thought, what a clever Halloween display, all while Albert's body swayed in the autumn wind, guarding the fairy field he once tended to. Welcome back, spooky souls, to a brand new episode of Let's Talk Spooky. I'm your host, Shauna, and I'm thrilled to be stepping into spooky season with you. Welcome October and all it has to offer. The weather is cooling, the leaves are turning, and I've got a lineup of creepy stuff that I can't wait to share with you. One of the upcoming episodes will feature listener stories. So, this is a call out to all of you listening. If you have a paranormal encounter or a strange experience that you want to share, send it our way. You can send it to letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com or DM me on one of our socials, either TikTok or Instagram, at Let's Talk Spooky Pod. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Here at Let's Talk Spooky, we explore the haunting folklore, eerie legends, paranormal tales, and all of those mysterious things that we can't quite explain. If that sounds like your vibe, hit that follow button and say hi. I love hearing from you guys. I love seeing new followers, and I love interacting with you. And it also helps our spooky community grow. So tonight, we're going to be venturing into some cornfields, places where the shadows stretch long, the wind rustles through the dry leaves, and far off in the field stands a silent watcher. Yep, tonight we are venturing in to the haunting presence of the scarecrow. So grab your lantern, step carefully between the rows of corn, and let's talk spooky. From a distance, though eerie, scarecrows are generally seemed harmless, right? Empty cases of straw stuffed into tattered clothes. But if folklore taught us anything, there's something about taking something simple and stitching it into something downright terrifying. The story of Albert is an example of this, a resurfaced fear of scarecrow symbols, but what's truly haunting is that so many people were more willing to see the scarecrow in the tree than the true horror that was in front of them. Now, the idea of scarecrows goes back way farther than you might think. Along the Nile, around 2500 BC, farmers set up crude wooden frames draped in nets to guard against their grains. Not exactly the stitched-up figures we picture today, but likely the bones of where the idea originated from. In the Middle Ages, things got dark, as they do, and whole villages depended on every harvest in order to survive, so scaring off birds was no small chore. But unfortunately, it was given to the smallest of us. Children, as young as 5, were sent into fields with clappers and stones to chase pests away. But with the arrival of the Black Death in the 14th century, there became a decline in the number of children left to take care of the crop fields. And that's when farmers turned to something else. Something they could build. Something they could design to scare off more than just the birds. But the spirits that seemed to linger, this is likely when scarecrows started to blur the lines between simple guardians to something much darker. Farmers would whisper that the faces weren't only for birds. They were meant to frighten spirits that wandered after the plague. Some even said they guarded against witches, demons, looking to take a foothold on the land. People went as far as leaving milk and grain at the feet of these scarecrows in hopes to appease them for protection. But as do, whispers grow into stories, and stories take lives of their own. Soon tales of scarecrows moving after dark, lanterns flickering in their hands as they stalked through the fields looking for trespassers and thieves, became a common narrative. In some versions, storytellers even went as far as saying the scarecrows went against their families, those who had created them in the first place. But as we can see, scarecrows became something a little bit more liminal. They weren't alive necessarily, but they weren't dead either. Standing there at the threshold where the human world bleeds into the supernatural one. In Japan, scarecrows are not just dusty props in a field. They carry a very spiritual weight about them. The Japanese term kakashi originally translated to something stinky. It came from the very literal way these scarecrows were created. Early farmers would hang rags, meat, fish bones, and essentially anything else that stunk on bamboo poles and set them on fire, letting the foul odor drive the birds away. Over time, these crude poles transformed into a much more human-like appearance, dressed in tattered clothes, given straw heads, and sometimes posed with even arrows and bows to give them a very spectral warrior presence, as though they were guarding the rice paddies in the morning mist. Even today, scarecrows still haunt the edge of Japanese tradition. Many villages hold kakashi matsuri, known as scarecrow festivals, where the streets are filled and crowded with figures of every shape and size, some in whimsical traditional dress, bright clothes, and friendly painted faces. But others take a very different approach, and are seen as much more sinister and creepy. But there is one place in Japan where the scarecrow tradition goes beyond a simple festival. Hidden deep in the remote valley of Aya, Shikoku Island, lies Nagoro, many now call Japan's Scarecrow Village. Nagoro was once a thriving home for hundreds of families, but like many rural towns, the younger generation drifted away to cities, leaving only a handful of residents behind. In the early 2000s, a woman named Ayano Sakumi began sewing lifelike scarecrows in honor of her lost neighbors. She dressed them in old clothes, gave them familiar postures, and placed them in spots where people once stood. They'll be waiting for the bus, sitting in classrooms, working in fields, and silently resting on porches. Today there are over 300 scarecrows in Nagoro, far outnumbering the living there. Walking through the village, it feels less like exploring abandoned places and more like wandering through a memory frozen in time. Everywhere you turn, there are stitched faces watching you, silent, unmoving, but unsettlingly present, There are no official ghost stories I could find about the town, but honestly, I don't think you need them. It's a very unease naturally built into this space, and the empty stairs do enough. So if you've ever visited Nagoro, I'd love to hear what you felt when you walked among these empty faces. Now, if we head back across continents and take a look at the Celtic scarecrows, we get a little bit more of an idea of where the haunting legends and ghost stories that we're more familiar with today originated. Celtic scarecrows stood between harvest and haunting, guardians made of straw and soil. But while farmers built them for protection, folklore did the opposite and added an additional darker twist to their presence. Because not every figure in the field was made by human hands. Some, if the stories are true, of course, belong to the spirits themselves. In Scottish and Northern England, bogles were trickster spirits of the countryside. They lingered in hedgerows, crossroads, and empty fields, shapes half seen in dusk, waiting for unsettled travelers. People swore they looked like scarecrows, ragged dummies slumped in the fields, too stiff and too still. But as you drew near, you might notice a turn of the head, or a whisper of your name. The bogle wasn't just a nuisance. In some tales, it soured milk, delayed crops, and cursed entire families who dared to mock it. Farmers even left offerings in the field edges in hoping the bogle would appraise them. And in the spookiest versions, bogles slipped inside the scarecrows we made, animating them and raising them from their post to patrol the land around them. Imagine a lantern swinging in the dark, and as you peer behind its glowing soft light, you don't see a person, but a straw figure dragging one crooked leg through the cornfield. The bogle blurred the line between effigy and spirit world. And in later Scottish folklore, that idea grew to something more sinister, we'll say. The bogle often was described as a kind of dark cousin to the fairies, a shadow figure that lingered on the edge of farmlands and villages. And like fairies, it thrived at crossroads and thresholds, places where worlds bleed into another. And also like fairies, it delighted in mischief. Parents would warn children that the bogle, like the fae folk, could steal them away if they wandered too close to the fields at night. And in some legends, the bogle was even said to serve a kind of enforcer to the fairies, sent to frighten and punish humans who offended them. To see a scarecrow-shaped figure standing at the edge of your field wasn't just a bad omen. It was a sign that you've angered a force far older than you. So, when people whisper about the bogle inhabiting the scarecrow, they were really describing the fear that these figures might not be us at all, and they might belong to something entirely different, a world entirely hidden by ancient creatures we only dream of understanding. I was able to track down a modern retelling of a very old folktale. It was rooted in the same eerie soil as the bogle, and it's called The Straw Laird. Long ago, there was a landlord whose greed was the measure of his life. He taxed his tenants harshly, took grain from their harvest, and left little but scraps for their families who worked his land. The people muttered that one day he'd pay, but the laird only sneered at them. When whispers of theft began, bushels of barley missing from the edges of his field, he swore that no man, woman, or child would ever take from him again. So he set to work on something very strange. he built himself a guardian, something to care for his barley, and it was unlike any scarecrow the villagers had ever seen. Its frame was not that of wood or straw, but it was made of animal bones that had been wired together. Around it, he stuffed straw and old tattered clothes. When the wind blew at night, the villagers could hear the sounds of the bones rattling, like teeth in the night. They called this figure the straw lard, a cruel jest at the landlord's expense. But the jest did sour quickly. At night, people would say that they would hear whispering. It was faint at first, carried across the wind, but they began to hear a more clear sound, a name, and then another, and then another. Names of all the villagers who had spoken unkindly against the landlord. Names of those who had even stolen a handful of grain or two. Soon after, those who had been named by the scarecrow began to vanish. First a shepherd, then a milkmaid, each one seemingly disappearing without a trace. Until one day their bodies were found, tangled in the straw at the edge of the field they had once tended. And most eerie of all, is stuffed in their mouths were husks of barley. Soon, for obvious reasons, the villagers grew terrified. They pleaded with the lard to take the thing down, but he only laughed at them. "It keeps my field safe, you see," he sneered at them as they pleaded. But then one autumn night, the lard himself disappeared. His manor seemed to sit empty, his hearth went cold, and when the villagers searched for him, they found him, weighing in the moonlight, in the same place his straw lard had once been. But this time, his coat was finer, his boots were new, and beneath the stitching of the sackcloth, you could see the pale skin of something much more human. The cruel landlord had taken the place of his own creation. Some say that his spirit still lingers, bound to the bone and the straw and the figure that he built. And they warn anyone foolish enough to take him down would find themselves taking its place the very next day. As expected, scarecrows eventually crossed the Atlantic with settlers, and once in the Americas, it started to gather its own stories. Shaped by the farmland life it soon became accustomed to. But it wasn't necessarily the same. By the 1800s, scarecrows dotted the fields of the Midwest and Appalachia. Farmers leaned on them not as bards of the crops, but as uneasy guardians against the unknown. Folklore whispered of the extra scarecrow. Farmers swore they built 5, yet in the morning they'd wake up and 6 would be there. Others claimed that scarecrows' heads would turn just so slightly as they walked past them, its button eyes fixed where they shouldn't be. Parents even told children to never look directly at the scarecrow after sundown, or they might whisper your name through the corn. But the American scarecrows didn't stay rooted in the soil, you see. They grew to become part of pulp culture. Nathaniel Hawthorne's 1852 story, Feather's Top, gave us one of the first literary scarecrows brought to life, a straw man animated by witchcraft who learns too much about his own hollow nature. And then came the children's tale, a little softened, of the figure of L. Frank Boehm's Wizard of Oz scarecrow, a goofy kind of take, though still slightly unsettling if you think about a straw man wishing for a brain. By the 20th century, scarecrows became a fixture in horror and pulp culture. From the classic Scarecrow that walks at midnight in R.L. Stine's Goosebump books, to the DC comic villain Scarecrow, which we all saw in Batman, to horror films like Scarecrows, Jeepers Creepers, and I'm sure you can think of a few more that I'm missing. Even the lawns on Halloween carry an echo of the straw man propped up on a porch with a slightly creepy stitched grin right beside a glowing jack-o'-lantern light. Maybe a harmless decoration, or maybe a watcher that reminds us that its presence is much older than we realize. Because the Scarecrow of the Americans is not a farm tool anymore. It's a cultural ghost. Its figure given life through folklore, fiction, and in some darker cases, where bodies are mistaken for them. In Chillicothe, Ohio in 2015, a group of contractors made a discovery that still haunts the town today. From a distance, what they saw looked like a ragged scarecrow tangled in a chain-link fence, a slumped figure with clothes torn and sleeves caught up in the barbed wire. Made them think nothing out of the unusual was taking place. But up close, that illusion turned to a nightmare. For it wasn't a scarecrow at all. It was the body of 31-year-old Rebecca Cade, who had been brutally attacked and left hanging there from the night before. Evidence of a blood-soaked rock was found next to her body. Authorities later arrested Donnie Kakor Jr. and charged him with her murder. The case shook the community, but not just because of the violence, but because for hours Kate's body had been mistaken for that of a scarecrow. From passerbyers, children walking to school, cars driving by, and it really echoed how deep folklore can bleed into reality. So from Albert Engel's grim fate in a Wisconsin cornfield, to the Celtic turnips used as effigies, to the Japanese kakashi, the scarecrow has always been more than just straw and cloth. It lingers in the field as a silent sentiment to a past so rich that sometimes something can become more than just straw. It can become a guardian and even an omen. That's where we'll end the fields tonight, my spooky friends. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please be sure to follow us at Let's Talk Spooky Pod on Instagram and Let's Talk Spooky on TikTok. Hit that follow button wherever you listen to your podcast as well. Not only does it support our show, but it helps other spooky people like yourselves find our little community. As mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you have a spooky experience or paranormal story, please take a moment to email us or slip into our DMs with your story to have it featured on this next upcoming listener episode. Until next time, stay curious and stay spooky.